that we haven't gotten enough rain in the last week. Alright guys, we've got this old carrier over here, and of course the sticker on it's worn out as usual. Trying to read that thing. A lot of times you take a light, kind of come under it at an angle like this. When you can't read it, you can see the impression that these stickers left and you can read it. So this is a 2009 and it is a 410A system, but yeah, these stickers wear out and you can't read anything on them. So anyway, it's an upstairs system, not cooling. I went up there, turned the thermostat on, the blower comes on. Got nothing out here. One behind me is the downstairs unit, which I'll turn that one off. Temporarily for noise purposes. But they're keeping it set in like the lower 70s, and it started creeping up into the 80s. And it is a, let's get some dust out of here so I can see what's going on with it. And I think this little rain shower is blown by. It just kind of got cloudy all of a sudden, started sprinkling. And so we got a yellow light flashing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2. So the fast flash is first. We got 7, then we got 2. So let's start with that. If there's a readable fault code on here, list faults right down here at the bottom of the door. And we have a 72. What does 72 tell us? 72 says us a thermal lockout. Thermal lockout. So, what are we looking at here? So, it looks like it's got that infinity board in it, but it's not hooked up down here to that communicating terminal. It's straight wired down there. So we've got our O, our W back to the heat strips, our Y, our common, and our R. So this thing's wired up for 24 volt operation, not communicating operation. So let's grab a meter and start looking around. I remember the first time I hooked up to one of these. These are the ones, these old refrigerant fittings where there's no valve core in there. So you take off that head and then you crack that stem and then you read your pressures, but you got to tighten it back. First time I hooked up on one of these about 20 years ago, I dumped half the charge out of it. So be careful with those, know how to hook up to them. Oh, the contactor just tried to close. Had to answer the phone real quick. So our contactor just tried to close. The fan did not come on. So let's see what kind of voltage we've got on this thing. And we have 0 voltage. And our disconnect is plugged in, which means we have a tripped breaker somewhere on this unit. It's just giving thermal overload. Now the sun's coming out, so it's going to get all steamy. So with thermal overload, let's see what other faults we have real quick. Contactor shorted, thermal range error, thermal lockout. I don't have any power coming to the contactor. So let's check the disconnect box and see what we've got over there. Probably nothing because it's not a fused disconnect. I don't think. We'll find out when I pull this out. It is a fused disconnect. So let's check the fuses. Okay, so the fuses are good, so now let's check the power and see if we got power coming to this thing. So I have 0 power coming to this box, which means there's more than likely there's no meter box out here, so there's going to be a breaker in the garage. So let me go turn that breaker on and we'll be right back. Breaker was on the other side of the house. And they've got the breaker 246 volts, so they've got the breaker connected on the line and not or load, not line, but it still works right now. So let's see what we have over here. If I'm not mistaken, you can reset this board by disconnecting the 24 volts. Or not. I don't know. We're going to find out. Screwdriver here. I'm suspecting a compressor problem. So I'm going to disconnect 24 volts temporarily from that board, see if it resets that fault code. Meantime, I'm going to check this capacitor. Going on with it. Sorry I had to answer another phone call. Anyway, I checked this capacitor. That's a 2012. That thing's dated December 2012. It's a Packard 45 or 40 by 5, reading 39 by 4.9. You do not see that very often anymore. But anyway, I've checked all that. I've reset my board. I'm going to get a quick amp draw on this compressor. We're going to see what it does when I put the contactor, push that contactor in. I'm thinking we're going to have a compressor problem. Not sure. Check voltage. We have 240 volts. Let's push this contactor in and see what happens. Came right on. All right, common and Y. We do have 24 volts. So right now we're waiting for a call from my set that to inrush. In the meantime, we're going to get these valves off and get some gauges hooked up and see what kind of pressures we get when this thing comes on. Yeah, I remember the first time I worked on one of these, probably my first year. And I was like, how do you get this? And somebody told me how to hook up to it and do all that. But I forgot to tighten those back before I took my gauges off. And that thing started dumping. And I just did get that thing closed back before I dumped the whole charge on it. And it's these. There's no Schrader core in there. So you hook up your gauges and then you crack these open to get your pressure. You just better tighten them back before you take your gauges off, or you will dump the charge out of this thing. So and make sure, I mean, you only have to crack it open. You don't have to crank it. You know, got it cranked it all the way down and end up actually closing the valve by doing that. You just got to crack it enough to bleed a little bit of pressure in there. So let me pull up my Job Link app and turn on these gauges and see what kind of pressure we've got. Should be pretty much. And these things are leaking because I'm reading a pressure on there. I haven't even opened them yet, and I'm registering a pressure on my gauges. So these things are leaking a little bit. When I took these caps off, you could hear a slight little hiss. But yeah, all you got to do, actually your refrigerant tool is all you need to open that up. Tight, crack it open, crack it up, and they may not have been snug down there real good to begin with. There's gnats all over the place out here. So I'm just waiting for this thing to come on at this point, which in the meantime, about that, had you guys hidden, so I guess you heard the unit come on while I was getting my temperature probes out. We're going to check our superheat and subcooling on this as soon as these things link up. Select our refrigerant type, 410A. We'll let it run a little bit, but what I noticed when it came on, there's my inrush. So that compressor gave me 65 amps when it started. Not sure what size breaker that is over there. We'll have to go back and look. It'll be on this sticker, probably a 30, 35. But that's leading me to believe that there's an issue with this compressor. Because there's our LRA on this, there's our fan compressor. So our LRA on this compressor is 58 amps. We got 64 on the inrush. And our max circuit protection, we'll go back and look at that. That's our max fuse on this. 222. These stickers, it's kind of hard to read. Max. So 25. So that's going to be a 25 amp breaker more than I have to go back over and look and confirm, but it calls for 25 amps. So here's what we're dealing with. We've got this old carrier unit This compressor is pulling 65 amps on the start inrush on it. When it gets hot and this thing is upstairs, that's where all the heat in the house is, and you're keeping it set at 72, this thing's going to shut off. It's going to warm back up there, and it's going to come right back on a few minutes later. This thing never cools down. It may cycle off and then cycle right back on these 90 degree, 92, 93 degree days. And eventually it's going to trip that breaker. I'm going to go over there and check that breaker and see if it's getting hot. But we have got a compressor problem on this, and I dare to try to put a hard start on it. I can, but it's not recommended. You can put a 3-wire on it with a relay, I guess, if you wanted to, or a super boost at this point. But I mean, if it didn't come with one, you shouldn't have to add one. If you're having problems with the compressor, all you're doing at that point is just adding a band-aid and postponing the inevitable. But I'm gonna go see what that breaker's doing over there. Alright, so here's our panel. So 25 amp breaker for that unit. This is the one for the other one. I'm going to use my little thermal imager real quick and see if this breaker is getting hot. And see what happens with that. Didn't really use this thing too much yet. But a lot of times you can feel when it's running, the back of your fingers, you'll feel the breaker getting warmer and warmer and warmer. And we're going to check it right there. Let this thing calibrate. But I'm not seeing a difference in these temperatures in this panel. 77, 77. So that's 87. It's hard to tell if you're looking right at the one you're looking at. So I'm going to put my finger on it real quick, because I can see my finger there. And that breaker is 81, 84, and then 85 below it. I'm not seeing. Now those things are warm. Master smoke, master bedroom. I don't know if I'm getting reflective heat off of that or not. Shouldn't be. But those breakers do not look to be warm at all. So let's go back over to the unit. Alright, so the breakers appear to be fine. They're not hot. And our amps on this while it's running 6.1, but it's pulling a hard 64 amps when it goes to start up. So it probably is doing that on the peak of the afternoon when it's hot. Don't know if it happened during the thunderstorms last night or not. Maybe that had a role to play in it a little bit, but it's only 82 degrees up there right now. The thing's been off all day long. This compressor was cool. And that first start, it pulled 65 amps out of 58 LRA. So she's getting worn out. But I'm going to talk to her and give her options. We can try the charge is good on it. We can try putting a hard start kit on it, but it's just, you're just putting a band-aid. You're postponing the inevitable. But if it's, you know, worth trying, if that's what they want to do, that's what we will do. So let me talk to them about that real quick and see what they want to do. Alright guys, so I went in and explained the situation to the homeowner about the compressor. It's pulling well over what the rated locked rotor amps are on it. Talked to her about putting a start kit on it and trying it. Gave her a price on that. I don't have the 3-wire relay kit. You guys have seen those, the little 1, 2, 3 or whatever they are. I do not have one of those. The only one I've got, which I forgot I used that a couple weeks ago. Got one of these. I'm going to try this. Either one should do just fine. but I'm going to try it first, see how it reacts to it, because I don't want to sell her something if it's not going to do her any good. So we're going to try it first, see if we get a better inrush out of this thing, see if it brings that starting amp down, and if it does, then we'll move forward and maybe see if we can squeeze another year out of it. So let me hook my wire back up to my board there. Whenever I'm doing a lot of stuff like that, especially when everything's as tight as it is in here, I will typically disconnect my 24 volts from the board, just in case I bump something on the board. I don't want to have to be digging around in the air handler changing a fuse. So that was the reversing valve. Let me get down here, trying to get this thing angled up. Of course, Carrier puts their stuff in here at this damn angle. Okay, so I've got that hooked back up. I'm going to put the disconnect back in. We're going to push this contactor in, see if that start kit makes a little bit of a difference. There's going to be a delay on that board after disconnecting the low voltage from it for 5 minutes. I'm not going to wait for that. We'll go ahead and check it and see what this compressor does when we push this contactor in. $53. So $53. It's a far cry better than 64. It's not great, to be honest. Let's just make it back out real quick. But it's better than 65. So it made a little bit of a difference. But what it's going to do in the peak of a day, when this thing shuts off, and then I think she says she keeps it set on 72, so there's no telling how many times this thing shuts off, warms back up upstairs, comes back on again, and how hard this thing's working. But it made a slight difference. So let me go in and talk to her and see if she wants to move forward with it, or get an estimate for a compressor and possibly an estimate for a new system. Alright guys, went back in and spoke to the missus. Her husband's not home. I gave her the options. Got the power turned off, by the way. So I'm going to take this start kit back out. They've been quoted for this. I explained to her it made a slight difference from 65 amps on the inrush down to 53. It's still not very far from what the locked rotor is on this compressor. So they've got a price for that. I'm going to turn it on, get it running. I'm taking that back off because we're going to give them a price in the morning. Carrier's closed, so I can't really price out the compressor replacement, what that would be. They're going to get the price on replacing the compressor, and then another estimate on replacing the system. And I explained to her we can put the hard start in it. It may get them another summer without a problem. It may not. It's just a band-aid on another problem, basically, is all it is. So really they're just going to get an estimate on a compressor for this, and then another estimate for a new system, and just whatever is comfortable for them to do with their budget. I'm assuming that's what they will do. So I'm basically leaving this as I found it at this point. And like I said, I got it back up and back on. I just can't predict when it's going to trip that breaker again. Like I said, when it is on, it runs fine, but tomorrow it's going to be another hot day. That thing starts to cycle on and off more often in the peak of the afternoon, Is that compressor going to be able to hold in there and not trip that breaker again or not? I don't know. But she's going to get all 3 options. Try to squeeze another summer out of it with a start kit, new compressor, or a new system. And we'll see how that turns out. Anyway, guys, appreciate you watching. Like, subscribe. Appreciate the ones that have. Sam, hope you're enjoying that bag. And we'll see you guys on the other side. Appreciate it.